If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. My name is Marcus Redfield, and I never thought I'd be telling this story. Even now, my hands shake as I write these words, and the memories of that winter in Minnesota's Boundary Waters still haunt my dreams. I've been a ranger for 15 years, and I thought I'd seen everything these woods could throw at me. Bears, wolves, brutal storms. They were all just part of the job. But what happened in the winter of 1978, that was different. That was something no training could have prepared me for. Let me start from the beginning. I was 42 then, living alone in my ranger station after losing Sarah, my wife, to cancer 2 years before. The job kept me busy, kept my mind off the empty house and the silence that followed me everywhere. I had my routine: wake up at dawn, check the weather reports, make my rounds, and keep an eye on the few brave souls who ventured into the wilderness during winter. That morning started like any other. I remember it clearly, Nice, December 12, 1978. The temperature was dropping fast, much faster than usual. The weather report said it would be cold, around 0 degrees, but my thermometer was already showing minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and it wasn't even noon yet. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I grabbed my old Winchester Model 70A, never went on patrol without it, and the silver compass my grandfather gave me when I was just a kid. "Trust this more than your eyes," he used to say. If only I had known how important that advice would become. The snow was deep that day, crunching under my boots as I started my usual patrol route. The forest was quiet, too quiet. You know how winter can be silent, but this was different. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath, waiting for something. That's when I saw the tracks. At first, I thought they were deer tracks.
We get plenty of those.
But something wasn't right. They were deeper than deer tracks should be, and they were wrong. They looked like deer hooves, but they were spaced like human footprints, as if something was walking on 2 legs. In 15 years of tracking, I'd never seen anything like it. And then I found the deer. It was half-eaten, frozen solid in the snow. Normal enough, Nice we get predator kills all the time. But this one was steaming. In minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit weather, fresh steam was rising from the frozen carcass. It didn't make sense. Nothing about it made sense. I knelt down to examine it closer, and that's when I felt it, a sudden drop in temperature that sent ice crystals forming on my beard. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I had this overwhelming feeling that something was watching me, something that wasn't human. That was the moment everything changed. That was the day I learned that some legends aren't just stories, and some monsters aren't just in our imagination. But let me tell you what happened next, and you can judge for yourself whether you believe me or not. All I know is that after that winter, I never looked at the forest the same way again. I headed back to my ranger station that evening, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The strange tracks and that steaming deer kept playing on my mind. That night, I could barely sleep. The next morning, I got a call that changed everything. A family reported their son, Tommy Wilson, hadn't come back from his hiking trip. He was the 3rd person to go missing in just 1 month. That wasn't normal. Not in my area, not in winter. I remember sitting at my desk, looking at the pictures of all 3 missing people. Tommy, age 19, who loved taking photos of wildlife; Mary Chen, a 34-year-old experienced hiker; and old Bill Peterson, who knew these woods almost as well as I did. They had nothing in common, except they all vanished without a trace. That evening, I decided to visit Joseph, an old friend from the Ojibwe tribe. He lived in a small house at the edge of the reservation, and if anyone knew these woods and their secrets, it was him. As I drove there, the snow started falling again, thick and heavy. Joseph took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. I told him about the tracks, the frozen deer, and the missing people. His dark eyes grew serious, and he got very quiet. "Marcus," he said slowly, stirring his coffee, "our people have stories about something that walks these woods in the deepest winter. Something that hunts, not just for food, but for the pleasure of the hunt. We call it the one who walks above. I'd known Joseph for years, and I'd never seen him look scared before, but he was scared now. Last night, he continued, my grandson heard something outside his window. It was calling his name, using his mother's voice, but his mother was in the kitchen the whole time. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. I remembered something from that morning. I could have sworn I heard Sarah's voice calling me from the woods, but Sarah had been gone for 2 years. Joseph reached into an old wooden chest and pulled out a small leather pouch. Take this, he said, handing it to me. Sacred herbs. If what I fear is out there, you'll need them. On my drive back to the station, the snow got worse. My headlights barely cut through the whiteness. Then my radio started acting weird. Instead of the usual static, I heard what sounded like whispers. And for a split second, in my rearview mirror, I thought I saw something tall standing by the road. When I looked again, nothing was there. Back at the station, I laid out everything I knew on my desk. The tracks, the missing people, the voices, the dropping temperatures. It all pointed to something I didn't want to believe in. Something that shouldn't exist. But I'm a ranger. It's my job to protect people and find those who are lost. Tomorrow, I would have to go back into those woods, whether I wanted to or not. As I cleaned my Winchester and packed my gear, I couldn't help wondering what if the next person to go missing was me. Little did I know, that was just the beginning of my nightmare. The next morning, I started early. The sun wasn't even up yet, but I had to find Tommy's last known location. His family said he was camping near Cedar Lake, about 5 miles into the woods. The temperature was even colder now, hitting -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Even my thickest winter gear barely kept me warm. I found Tommy's campsite around noon. What I saw there made my blood run cold. His tent was still standing, but it was torn from the inside out like someone minus or something minus had burst through it. His backpack was there, and his phone, camera, and food were untouched. That didn't make sense. No normal animal would ignore the food. Then I saw his camera. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. The last few pictures showed the woods at night. Normal at first, but then there was something in the background. A tall, dark shape among the trees. In the final photo it was closer, and I could make out what looked like antlers, but they were huge, way too big for any normal deer. That's when I heard it. Sarah's voice, clear as day, calling from deeper in the woods. Marcus. Help me, Marcus. I'm cold. I knew it couldn't be real. Sarah was gone, but the voice, it was exactly like hers. Every little detail was perfect. Marcus, please. I gripped my rifle tighter and said out loud, "You're not Sarah." The voice changed then. It turned into a horrible mix of sounds, like a deer crying, a person screaming, and the wind howling all at once. The trees around me started crackling as ice formed on them instantly. My compass went crazy, the needle spinning in circles. Through the trees ahead I saw it. It was tall, maybe 15 feet high. Its body looked like a person's but wrong. He too thin, like someone who had starved for years. Its skin was gray like dead wood, and huge antlers grew from its head. But its eyes were the worst part. They were completely black, like empty holes, but I could feel them staring right at me. I raised my rifle, but my fingers were so cold they could barely move. The creature took a step forward, and the ground froze under its foot. It opened its mouth, needle a black hole filled with sharp teeth. Needle a blaze, and I heard Sarah's voice come out again. "Why did you let me die, Marcus?" I fired. The bullet hit it right in the chest, but it just made a sound like cracking ice. The creature didn't even flinch. That's when I remembered Joseph's herbs. I had wrapped some around my bullets last night, just in case. I loaded one while backing away. The thing was getting closer. The air was so cold my eyes were starting to freeze. Everything it passed turned to ice, needle ablaze, trees, rocks. Even the air itself seemed to freeze. I raised my rifle again, aimed carefully, and I fired. I fired the blessed bullet. This time was different. The creature made a sound I'll never forget. Ice breaking on a frozen lake, mixed with a scream that no human or animal could make. It stumbled backward, and black liquid oozed from where I hit it. But I knew one shot wouldn't be enough. I started running. My lungs burned from the freezing air as I crashed through the woods. Behind me, I could hear it coming. Trees cracking, ice forming, and that terrible sound it made. I had 5 more blessed bullets. I had to make them count. Then my radio crackled to life. "Marcus, this is Dave. We got your distress signal. Coming your way with John." No, I hadn't sent any signal. "Dave, stay away," I yelled into the radio. "It's a trap. Do you hear me? Stay." The radio went dead. The creature could mimic voices. It was luring them here. I heard helicopter blades in the distance. Dave and John were coming, thinking they were rescuing me. I had to warn them. I changed direction, heading toward the sound of the helicopter. The creature's footsteps behind me got louder. I could feel the cold getting worse. My beard was solid ice now, and my fingers were starting to turn blue. Through the trees, I saw the helicopter landing in a small clearing. Dave and John were jumping out. "Rifles ready. Get back in," I screamed. "Get out of here." They looked up, confused. Then their faces changed to pure horror. The creature emerged from the trees behind me, now even taller than before. Ice spread across the clearing like a wave. John tried to run. The creature moved so fast. One moment, it was behind me. The next, it was right in front of him. Its long, gray arm reached out. I don't want to describe what happened next. I still have nightmares about it. Dave managed to fire a few shots, but they did nothing. The creature grabbed him too. I raised my rifle, loaded with another blessed bullet. The creature turned to me, still holding Dave. It started to speak, using John's voice, then Dave's, then Sarah's, all mixed together in a horrible way. My hands were shaking. I had 4 bullets left. Dave was all ready. I couldn't save him, but maybe I could stop this thing from hurting anyone else. I aimed carefully, remembering everything I'd learned in the Marines. The creature's black eyes stared into mine. It felt like looking into an endless frozen darkness. I squeezed the trigger. The blessed bullet hit the creature right between its black eyes. It let out that terrible scream again and dropped Dave's body. The thing stumbled backward, black liquid pouring from its wounds. But it wasn't dying. It was getting angry. The creature raised its arms, and suddenly the wind became a full blizzard. I could barely see 5 feet in front of me. The cold was worse than anything I'd ever felt, like thousands of ice needles stabbing my skin. Then I remembered something Joseph had told me. The ancient burial ground. Evil things can't stand on sacred ground. I knew where it was, just about half a mile away. If I could just make it there. I ran through the storm, my legs feeling like blocks of ice. The creature followed, throwing full-grown trees at me like they were twigs. One crashed down right next to me, showering me with snow and ice. 3 blessed bullets left. I could hear it getting closer. The voices were everywhere now. Sarah, Dave, John, Tommy, all calling out to me, begging for help. I covered my ears and kept running. Finally, I saw the stone markers of the burial ground through the snow. Just a few more steps. Something grabbed my leg. I fell face first into the snow. The creature's hand was like frozen iron around my ankle. It started dragging me backward. I rolled over, aimed my rifle, and fired twice more. Both bullets hit. The creature let go, shrieking in pain and rage. 1 blessed bullet left. I scrambled to my feet and limped onto the burial ground. The creature followed but stopped at the edge. It seemed confused, angry. It couldn't step onto the sacred land. For a moment we just stared at each other, me gasping for breath, it bleeding black ice onto the snow. Then it did something I didn't expect. It smiled. That smile showed all its sharp teeth and seemed to say, "I can wait. I have all the time in the world." I raised my rifle one last time. The creature was already starting to heal, the black ice closing over its wounds. I had 1 shot left to make it count. My fingers were so numb I could barely feel the trigger. The creature stood there, still smiling, as if daring me to try. I took a deep breath, aimed for its heart, and I pulled the trigger. The last blessed bullet hit right where its heart should be. The creature's smile disappeared. The creature's smile disappeared. It threw its head back and let out a scream so loud it shook snow from the trees. Black ice poured from its wound like a frozen waterfall, but it didn't die. Instead, it started to shrink, getting smaller and smaller, until it was about the size of a normal person. Then it turned and ran into the woods, leaving a trail of black ice behind it. I stayed on the burial ground until sunrise, shivering and scared it might come back. When the sun finally came up, I could barely walk. 3 of my fingers had turned black from frostbite. My wrist, the doctors couldn't save them later. The official report said Dave and John died in a helicopter crash caused by extreme weather. They never found Tommy, Mary, or Bill. The strange tracks, the black ice, the claw marks 20 feet up on my ranger station wall, all of it melted away when spring came. I quit my job and moved south after that. I couldn't stay in those woods knowing what was out there, but every winter, I checked the news from Boundary Waters. Every winter, there are more missing people, more strange tracks, more whispers of something tall walking through the trees. Sometimes at night when it's very cold and quiet, I think I hear Sarah's voice calling me, but I never answer. I keep my doors locked, my windows shut, and blessed herbs hanging over every entrance, because I know the truth now. It's still out there, waiting, hunting, and it remembered. Just last week, I got a letter from Joseph. People are going missing again in Boundary Water. The winters are getting colder, and at night they say you can hear voices in the woods, calling out in the voices of the dead. I know what's happening. The Wendigo is getting hungry again, so I'm writing this story as a warning. If you're ever in those northern woods in winter, and you hear a loved one's voice calling from between the trees, don't answer. If you see strange tracks in the snow, or feel the temperature drop suddenly, or hear whispers on your radio, run as fast as you can, because if you see its black eyes staring at you from between the pines, if you see that terrible smile full of sharp teeth, it's already too late. My name is Frank Hawthorne, and I need to tell you about something that happened back in 1963, something that changed my life forever. I was a ranger on the Navajo Nation reservation in northern Arizona, and what I saw there still haunts my dreams. I guess I should tell you a bit about myself first. I'm half Navajo from my father's side, though you might not guess it from my lighter skin and green eyes. Those came from my mother. At 35, I thought I had seen it all. Night from my time as an army tracker in Korea to my years patrolling these vast red canyons. But I was wrong. So very wrong. That morning started like any other. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. I kissed my wife Helen goodbye. She was heading to the local school where she taught 3rd grade. "Be careful out there," she said, like she always did. I smiled and promised I would, not knowing those would be the last normal moments we'd share. The radio crackled to life just as I was starting my patrol. "Frank, you there? We've got another one." It was Bill from the Thompson Ranch. His voice was shaky. More cattle found, different this time. "You need to see this." I turned my old Ford pickup toward the ranch, dust trailing behind me like a ghost. The air felt different that morning. Meet us heavy, like before a storm. But the sky was clear, except for that strange dust cloud approaching from the southwest. What I found at the ranch was just the beginning. A perfect circle of dead ravens, laid out like some kind of sick clock. Their bodies weren't torn or bloody. They looked like they'd just dropped from the sky. And there was something else, something that made my skin crawl. Fresh markings on the canyon walls, meet us petroglyphs that hadn't been there the day before. Bill was standing there, his old cowboy hat twisted in his hands. "That ain't the worst of it, Frank," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Last night I saw something. A coyote, but it was walking on 2 legs like a man. I felt my father's medicine pouch grow heavy against my chest. I'd always carried it, more out of respect for him than belief. But standing there, looking at those ravens and those fresh petroglyphs, something deep inside me knew, the old stories my father used to tell. The ones I'd dismissed as superstition, they weren't just stories after all. And that was just the first hour of my morning. I didn't know it then, but I was about to face something that no amount of army training or ranger experience could prepare me for. Something that would force me to confront not just an ancient evil but my own identity, my own beliefs, and the true meaning of sacrifice. This is my story, a story about a skinwalker's territory and the price we paid to protect it. I drove back to the ranger station, my mind racing about what I'd seen. The dust storm was getting closer, and the radio kept crackling with static. Something felt off, my niece, the kind of feeling you get when someone's watching you but you can't see who it is. Back at my desk, I pulled out my dad's old journal. I'd never really read it before, just kept it in my drawer. Dad died when I was 15, and everyone in the tribe said he died fighting something evil. I never believed them. Mom just said he had an accident in the canyons, and that was that. As I flipped through the pages, my hands started shaking. There were drawings, the same kind of circles I'd seen with those dead ravens. Dad had written about strange animal deaths, about shadows that moved the wrong way, about yellow eyes watching from the cliffs. The phone rang, making me jump. Frank, it was Helen. Her voice sounded strange. Something weird is happening at the school. The kids are saying they saw a coyote in the playground, but, Frank, they said it was standing up and looking in the windows. My throat went dry. Helen, listen to me. Lock the doors. Don't go outside. I'm coming right now. Frank, the line went dead. I grabbed my rifle and Dad's medicine pouch, then rushed to my truck. The wind was picking up, throwing red dust everywhere. As I drove toward the school, I saw something that made my blood run cold. 3-toed tracks in the dust, tracks that seemed to change direction in the middle of a step, like whatever made them had suddenly turned without moving. The school was quiet. Too quiet. No kids playing, no bells ringing. Just the wind whistling through the empty playground. And there, in the sand, were more tracks leading right to Helen's classroom. I found her room empty. Papers scattered everywhere, like there'd been a fight. On her desk was a message written in a shaky hand. The old ways were right. That's when I heard it, Mayas, like someone speaking Navajo, but in a dialect so old I could barely understand it. It was coming from outside, from the direction of the ancient burial grounds. I knew then that I couldn't ignore the old stories anymore. Whatever had taken Helen, whatever had been killing those animals and leaving those signs, it was something from those stories. Something that had been waiting, watching, testing us. And now it had my wife. I touched Dad's medicine pouch and whispered the protection prayer he'd taught me long ago, the one I'd always thought was just nonsense. But this time I meant every word, because now I knew the Skinwalker wasn't just a legend. It was real, and it had brought its ancient evil right to my doorstep. I knew I needed help, so I drove as fast as I could to see old Joseph, the medicine man who'd been friends with my father. I'd always avoided him and his talks about the old ways, but now I had no choice. I found him sitting outside his small house, like he'd been waiting for me. His weathered face looked worried. "I've been expecting you, Frank," he said quietly. "The signs have been clear. It's happening again, just like it did with your father." My hands tightened into fists. "What do you mean? What really happened to my dad?" Old Joseph sighed and motioned for me to sit. "Your father was protecting us from something ancient, something evil. A skinwalker, one of the most powerful ones. It's been here for hundreds of years, taking people, testing us. Your father fought it and managed to wound it. But what? It took him, Frank. Just like it's taken Helen now." The wind picked up, making the windows rattle. Old Joseph reached for a small wooden box and opened it. Inside was a black knife made of obsidian, volcanic glass. "Your father's knife," he said. "Blessed by 7 medicine men. It's the only thing that can hurt the Skinwalker. But Frank, you need to understand, Mayas, this thing, it plays tricks with your mind. It will look like people you know. It will try to confuse you. As if on cue, we heard Helen's voice calling from outside. "Frank, help me, please." Old Joseph grabbed my arm. "That's not her. Don't go out there." The voice called again, sounding scared and hurt. Every part of me wanted to run outside, but I forced myself to stay put. "How do I find the real Helen?" I asked. "The Skinwalker's lair will be in the old caves near the burial ground, but you can't go tonight. Tonight is too dangerous. The dust storm." He looked out the window at the red clouds. "It's not a natural storm. It's the Skinwalker's power growing stronger." He taught me some protection prayer and showed me how to use my father's medicine pouch properly. Inside were herbs, blessed stones, and something else. A small piece of paper with my dad's handwriting. "The cave with 3 peaks. Dawn only. Trust nothing you see." I spent that night at Old Joseph's, listening to the wind howl and trying not to hear Helen's voice calling me over and over. Each time it sounded more desperate, more real. Tomorrow at dawn, I would go to the caves. But as I sat there, watching the storm rage outside, I couldn't help wondering, would I be strong enough to face what took my father, and would I find Helen before it was too late? The next morning, just before sunrise, I headed to the caves. The dust storm had finally stopped, leaving everything covered in red sand. The silence was heavy, no birds singing, no wind blowing. Even the air felt wrong. I found the cave with 3 peaks easily enough. It looked just like any other cave from the outside, but something about it made my skin crawl. Before going in, I checked my gear, flashlight, my father's blessed knife, the medicine pouch, and my rifle. Though Old Joseph had warned me regular bullets wouldn't help much. Just as I was about to enter, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw myself. Another Frank Hawthorne, looking exactly like me, standing there with a slight smile. "It's confusing, isn't it?" my double said. "Which one of us is real?" I gripped the medicine pouch tight, remembering Old Joseph's words, "Trust nothing you see." Without saying a word, I took out the obsidian knife. The other me stepped back, its smile turning into something ugly and wrong. "You're just like your father," it hissed, its voice changing to sound like a mix of human and animal. He thought he could stop me too. Then it changed shape, turning into a coyote that stood on 2 legs, with yellow eyes that glowed in the dim light. It ran into the cave, moving faster than anything I'd ever seen. I followed it inside, my flashlight beam bouncing off the walls. The cave was bigger than I expected, with tunnels going in different directions. On the walls were handprints, hundreds of them, some looking very old, others fresh. With horror, I realized they were from all the people the Skinwalker had taken over the years. Then I heard Helen's voice echoing through the tunnels. "Frank, is that really you this time?" "Helen," I called back, trying to figure out which tunnel it came from. "I'm scared, Frank. It keeps changing faces. Sometimes it looks like you, sometimes like other people. I don't know what's real anymore." I followed her voice, keeping the knife ready. The tunnel opened into a large cave room. There was Helen, tied up with what looked like shadows. But there wasn't just one Helen Manas Prop. There were 3 of them, all looking exactly the same, all calling my name. "Frank, it's me," they all said at once. I stood there, my heart pounding. One of them had to be the real Helen Manas, but which one? And what would happen if I chose wrong? I remembered something important, something only the real Helen would know. On our first date, she had told me a secret about a tiny heart-shaped birthmark behind her left ear. I stepped closer, my hand gripping the obsidian knife tightly. "If you're really Helen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "tell me about our first date." 2 of the Helens started talking at once, making up stories. But the third Helen, the one in the middle, just smiled softly and said, "You were so nervous, you spilled coffee all over your new shirt, and then you saw my birthmark." Before she could finish, the other 2 Helens screamed, not human screams, but something that sounded like angry coyotes. Their faces started to melt and change. I ran to the real Helen and started cutting through the shadow ropes with the obsidian knife. Suddenly, the cave got very cold. The 2 fake Helens merged together, growing taller, twisting into something horrible. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw what the skinwalker really looked like, part human, part animal, with too many limbs and yellow eyes that seemed to glow with hate. Your father couldn't save anyone, it said in a voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. What makes you think you can? I pushed Helen behind me and held up my father's medicine pouch. My father wounded you, I said. That's why you've been hiding all these years, getting stronger. But he left me what I needed to finish this. The skinwalker laughed, but I could see it eyeing the obsidian knife nervously. It started circling us, moving in that impossible way that made my eyes hurt to watch. I'll make you a deal, Frank Hawthorne, it said. Leave now with your wife. Forget about all this, or stay and end up like your father. Just another handprint on my wall. Helen gripped my arm. Frank, don't listen. It's trying to trick you, just like it's been tricking people for hundreds of years. I knew she was right. This thing had to be stopped, or it would keep taking people forever. But as I stood there, facing this ancient evil, I realized I had no idea how to actually fight it. Then I felt the medicine pouch grow warm against my chest, and I heard my father's voice in my head, as clear as if he was standing next to me. The old ways, son. Remember the old ways. I opened the medicine pouch with shaking hands and found what I needed. My father's sacred corn pollen, and the small piece of paper with the ancient prayer written on it. The skinwalker's yellow eyes followed my every move. Helen, I whispered, when I start the prayer, run toward the cave entrance. Don't look back, no matter what you hear. The skinwalker lunged at us, but I threw the corn pollen in a circle around us, just like old Joseph had taught me. The creature hit what seemed like an invisible wall and shrieked in anger. I started saying the prayer, the same words my father had written down years ago. My voice echoed through the cave, getting stronger with each word. The skinwalker began to change shapes rapidly. A coyote, an owl, my father, Helen, me, Myote, like it couldn't hold on to any single form. Run, Helen, now, I shouted. As Helen ran, the skinwalker tried to follow her, but the corn pollen circle held it back. It turned to me, its face twisting into something terrible. You can't trap me forever, it snarled. I am as old as these mountains. No, I said, still reading the prayer. But I can bind you here, just like my father tried to do. The creature lunged at me again and again, but each time the circle held. I could feel the medicine pouch growing hotter, almost burning through my shirt. The skinwalker's movements were getting slower, like it was fighting against invisible chains. Then I saw them, Myote's ghostly figures appearing around us. People in old clothes, Native Americans in traditional dress. Even a man who looked just like my father. All the skinwalker's victims over the years coming to help trap it. No, it screamed. They are mine. Their souls are mine. I raised the obsidian knife, finishing the last words of the prayer. The ghost people moved closer, forming a tight circle around the skinwalker. The creature thrashed and howled, its yellow eyes dimming. But just as I thought we had won, it made one final desperate move. The skinwalker made one last terrible scream and reached out with its twisted hands, not for me but toward the cave entrance where Helen had run. I heard her cry out in pain. Without thinking, I broke the corn pollen circle and ran to her. That was my mistake. The skinwalker burst free, moving faster than ever. It grabbed Helen before I could reach her. Choose, Frank Hawthorne, it growled, holding Helen with its clawed hands. Your wife's life or trapping me forever. You can't have both. Helen looked at me, tears in her eyes, but her voice steady. Frank, you know what you have to do. Don't let it take anyone else. The ghost of my father stepped forward, placing his hand on my shoulder. Even though I couldn't feel it, somehow his touch gave me strength. He nodded at the obsidian knife in my hand. The skinwalker laughed. Even if you choose to fight, you'll lose her, just like your father lost everything. But then Helen did something unexpected. She grabbed my father's medicine pouch from around my neck and pressed it against the skinwalker's chest. The creature howled in pain, its grip loosening just enough. Now, Frank, Helen shouted. I jumped forward with the obsidian knife, but Helen was faster. She pushed herself and the skinwalker backward toward a deep crack in the cave wall. The The medicine pouch started glowing bright blue. Helen, no, I screamed, reaching for her. I love you, she said, and then she pulled the skinwalker into the crack with her. There was a flash of blue light, and the sound of the creature's final scream mixed with the rumble of falling rocks. The crack sealed itself, leaving only a faint blue glow behind. I fell to my knees, the obsidian knife slipping from my hand. The ghost people, including my father, gathered around the sealed crack, their hands raised, making sure the skinwalker would stay trapped forever. But Helen, my Helen, was gone. That was 10 years ago. I'm still a ranger here, but I'm different now. Old Joseph trained me to be a medicine man after what happened. He said Helen's sacrifice made the binding stronger than anything he'd ever seen. Sometimes, on quiet nights when the moon is full, I go back to that cave. The blue glow is still there, faint but steady. The handprints on the walls have faded, and no new ones have appeared. The skinwalker is trapped, and all those souls it took are finally at peace. I wear my father's medicine pouch every day now, and I've added Helen's wedding ring to it. The local people come to me for help and protection, just like they used to go to old Joseph. The young rangers ask me about the stories, about what really happened in 1963. I tell them enough to keep them careful, but not enough to give them nightmares. Last week, a new ranger reported seeing strange tracks near the Thompson Ranch tracks that changed direction mid-step. I went out there myself and found a perfect circle of living ravens, not dead ones. They were protecting something, a small turquoise stone with Helen's initials carved into it. I keep that stone in the medicine pouch too. It reminds me that sometimes love is stronger than ancient evil. Helen knew that. My father knew that. Now I know it too. The skinwalker's territory is quiet these days. The dust storms are normal again, and the animals behave like they should. But I still patrol these canyons, watching and waiting, because even though the skinwalker is trapped, there are other old things out here in the desert, other dangers that most people don't believe in mines until they have to. So if you're ever out here in northern Arizona, and you see tracks that don't make sense, or hear voices calling your name in the wind, or spot yellow eyes watching from the cliffs, don't ignore it. Don't pretend it's not real. Find someone like me, someone who knows the old ways, because the stories are true, all of them, and sometimes, believing in them is the only thing that keeps you alive. My name is Joseph Kincaid, and I've been a ranger here in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey for the past 15 years. Most folks around here know me as Joe, the quiet ranger who lives in that small cabin near the old fire tower with his daughter Sarah. But what they don't know is that I'm about to tell you something that happened during the winter of 1959, something that changed our lives forever. I remember that morning like it was yesterday. The air was bitter cold, and the pine trees were covered in a thick blanket of snow. I was sipping my morning coffee when I got the first call. Old Man Thompson, one of our local farmers, was practically screaming into the phone about finding his entire herd of sheep dead. Now, we get calls about animal attacks pretty often. My cuz, usually coyotes or the occasional bear. But something in his voice made my skin crawl. Joe, this ain't no normal animal attack. Thompson's voice shook as he spoke. They're all drained dry, not a drop of blood left, and there's these weird burned circles all around them. I grabbed my jacket, my grandfather's old silver cross which I always kept in my pocket for luck, and headed out. As I drove down the snowy road in my ranger truck, I couldn't shake this feeling in my gut that something was very wrong. You see, I'm not just any ranger. My grandfather was William Kincaid, one of the most famous devil hunters in these parts back in the 1920s. He used to tell me stories that would make your hair stand on end. Stories about something that lived in these woods, something that wasn't supposed to exist. When I got to Thompson's farm, what I saw made me question everything I knew about the natural world. The sheep were laid out in a perfect circle, their bodies frozen stiff in the morning cold. But what really got me were the tracks in the snow, my cuz hoofprints that started normally on the ground, but then they just went up. Like whatever made them had simply walked into the sky. As I stood there, trying to make sense of it all, I heard Sarah's school bus pulling away in the distance. My daughter, just 14, was all I had left after my wife passed away 5 years ago. Little did I know that she would soon be caught up in this nightmare too. That was just the beginning. Over the next few days, more reports started coming in. Other farmers lost livestock. Children in town started talking about a dragon horse they saw in their dreams. And then there were the fires, perfect circles of burned ground appearing and disappearing in the forest, with no explanation of how they started or why they went out. But the worst part? The screams. At night, echoing through the pines, came sounds that no animal on God's green earth should be able to make. Sounds that reminded me of my grandfather's warnings. The devil still hunts in these woods, Joe, and someday it might come hunting for us. I didn't know it then, but that morning at Thompson's farm was the start of a hunt that would test everything I believed in, challenge everything I loved, and force me to face the legendary Jersey Devil itself. And this time, it wasn't just about protecting the forest, it was about protecting my daughter or my home, and stopping a curse that had haunted these woods for centuries. This is my story, the story of the Jersey Devil's hunt, and I swear on my grandfather's silver cross that every word of it is true. That evening, when Sarah came home from school, I noticed something was different. She was quieter than usual, her face a little pale as she pushed her dinner around her plate. "Dad," she said finally, looking up at me with those brown eyes that reminded me so much of her mother's. "I had a weird dream in class today. I never fall asleep in class, but I couldn't help it." I put down my fork. "What kind of dream, sweetheart?" "I saw it flying over our house," she whispered. "It had a horse's head, but different, and wings, huge wings. It looked right at me, Dad, and I think it knew who I was." A chill ran down my spine. I tried to keep my voice steady. "It was just a dream, Sarah. Nothing to worry about." But later that night, as I sat at my desk looking through my grandfather's old journal, I heard it. A sound like leather wings flapping right outside my window. When I looked up, there was nothing there, just the dark shapes of pine trees swaying in the wind. But on the window, there was frost forming in a strange pattern, like someone had drawn symbols with their finger. The next morning brought more bad news. 3 families of trappers who lived deep in the woods hadn't been heard from in days. Their cabins were found empty, meals still on tables, beds still made, but no sign of where they'd gone. The local police were baffled, but I noticed something they missed. Those same strange symbols I'd seen on my window, carved into the cabin doors. I started carrying my grandfather's journal everywhere. Its pages were filled with drawings, notes, and warnings about the Jersey Devil. One page caught my eye, a sketch of the same symbols I'd been seeing with a note. "They appear before it hunts." Things got stranger at home too. Sarah started getting headaches, and her drawings in art class changed. Instead of her usual horses and flowers, she was drawing dark shapes with wings and those symbols over and over. Her art teacher called me, worried. I knew I had to do something. But how do you fight something that most people don't even believe exists? Something that can vanish into thin air and leave only frost and fear behind. That's when I remembered my grandfather's old chest in the attic, the one he told me never to open unless I absolutely had to. "Only when the devil hunts again," he'd said. That night, after Sarah went to bed, I climbed up to the attic with my flashlight. The chest was heavy, covered in dust and cobwebs. The lock was old, but the key I'd kept all these years still worked. Inside, I found things I never expected. Maps of the Pine Barrens marked with strange X's, bottles of holy water, iron chains blessed by priests, and a letter addressed to me. As I picked up the letter, the wind outside grew stronger. The trees creaked and groaned, and somewhere in the distance, I heard that scream again, the one that didn't belong to any normal animal. Sarah called out from her room, another headache hitting her. I looked at the letter in my shaking hands. Whatever was hunting in our woods, whatever was affecting my daughter, or I knew right then that my grandfather had been preparing me for this my whole life. The real hunt was about to begin. With trembling hands, I opened my grandfather's letter. The paper was old and yellow, but his handwriting was clear as day. "Dear Joe, if you're reading this, then it's happening again. The devil is hunting, and it's chosen our family, just like it did in my time. The headaches your daughter is getting, Myas, they're not normal. The devil is trying to connect with her, just like it did with your mother when she was young. You need to protect Sarah at all costs." I had to sit down. My mother, she'd never told me about any of this. She'd passed away when I was just a kid, and now I wondered if there was more to her death than I knew. A loud crash from Sarah's room made me jump. I ran downstairs, taking the steps two at a time. When I burst into her room, the window was wide open, cold wind blowing in, and her drawings were scattered everywhere. Sarah was sitting up in bed, shivering. "Dad," she said, her voice shaking. It was right outside my window. It was looking at me. I shut the window and held her close. That's when I noticed her newest drawing on the bed. It showed the old Leeds mansion, a place deep in the pine barrens that had been abandoned for decades. But Sarah had never seen it, never even heard of it. How could she draw it? The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to see Father Michael at the local church. He was old enough to remember my grandfather and knew all the local history. "The Leeds mansion," he said, looking worried when I showed him Sarah's drawing. "That's where it all started, Joe. Back in the 1700s, Mother Leeds cursed her 13th child before it was born. That curse created what we now call the Jersey Devil. But there's more, Myas. Every few generations, it tries to find a new connection, usually through a young girl from certain families. Your family. How do I stop it?" I asked. Father Michael handed me an old iron cross. "You'll need this, and Joe, be careful. The closer you get to stopping it, the stronger its attacks will become." That night, the temperature dropped below freezing. The radio reported strange weather patterns all over the pine barrens. Sarah's headaches got worse, and she kept mumbling about hearing songs in a language she didn't understand. I sat at my kitchen table, spreading out my grandfather's maps. The Leeds mansion was marked with a red X, and around it were written words like portal and binding place. I knew what I had to do, but the thought of it made my stomach turn. I'd have to go to that mansion, and I'd have to take Sarah with me. According to both Father Michael and my grandfather's notes, she was the key to ending this. As I packed supplies, Maya's flashlights, the blessed iron cross, my grandfather's journal, and holy water, I heard wings flapping outside again, but this time when I looked out, I saw it. Just for a second, against the full moon, Maya's a dark shape with massive wings and a head like a horse, but twisted and wrong. It saw me too, and let out a screech that made all the windows rattle. Sarah appeared beside me, pale but calmer than I'd seen her in days. "It's time, isn't it, Dad? We have to go to the mansion." I nodded, trying to hide how scared I was. "Yes, sweetheart, but I promise, I won't let anything happen to you." We packed the truck as the wind howled around us. The hunt was leading us to the Leeds mansion, and somehow I knew that by sunrise, either we'd end this curse, or it would end us. The drive to the Leeds mansion was the longest 20 minutes of my life. The truck's headlights barely cut through the thick fog that had suddenly appeared. Sarah sat quietly beside me, clutching her sketchbook. Every now and then she'd shiver even though the heater was on full blast. "It's getting stronger," she whispered. "I can feel it, Dad, like it's pulling me." The old dirt road ended at a rusty gate. Beyond it, the Leeds mansion stood like a dark shadow against the night sky. Paint peeling, windows broken, and vines crawling up its walls. It looked exactly like Sarah's drawing. The sight of it made my heart pound. As soon as we stepped out of the truck, the air felt different. Colder, heavier. Our flashlight beams showed strange marks on the ground. Those same hoofprints I'd seen at Thompson's farm. But here they were everywhere, crossing and crisscrossing like some crazy dance pattern. "Stay close to me," I told Sarah, gripping the iron cross in one hand and my flashlight in the other. The front door was already open, swinging slightly in the wind. Inside, the mansion smelled of old wood and something else, something that reminded me of burnt matches. Our footsteps echoed on the wooden floors. Moonlight filtered through broken windows, casting weird shadows on the walls. "Dad, look." Sarah pointed to the wall. In the flashlight beam, we could see those symbols again, carved deep into the wood. They seemed to pulse slightly, like they were alive. Suddenly, all the doors in the house slammed shut at once. Sarah grabbed my hand tight. A cold wind that shouldn't have been possible inside the house whipped around us, and then we heard it. That horrible scream, but this time it was inside with us. The basement, Sarah said, her voice sounding distant. It wants us to go to the basement. I didn't want to go down there, but I knew we had to. The basement door creaked open by itself. As we walked down the stair, our flashlight showed more symbols, these ones glowing faintly blue. The basement was one huge room with a dirt floor. In the center was a perfect circle of those strange symbols, carved into the ground, and hanging from the ceiling were 3 old lanterns, swinging by themselves even though there was no wind down here. "It's here," Sarah whispered. The temperature dropped so fast I could see our breath. The lanterns went out one by one. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw something moving in the shadows, something big. Then I heard the sound of leathery wings folding. It stepped into our flashlight beam, and for the first time I saw the Jersey Devil clearly. It was worse than any description I'd ever heard. Its horse head was twisted and wrong, with eyes that glowed red like hot coals. Its bat wings scraped the ceiling, and its hooved feet left smoking marks on the ground. But the worst part, it was looking right at Sarah, and she was looking back at it like they were having a conversation without words. I raised the iron cross, and the creature hissed. But then Sarah did something that made my blood run cold. She took a step toward it. "Sarah, no," I shouted. But she kept walking, her hand reaching out toward the monster. The real battle for my daughter's soul was about to begin, and I had no idea if we would make it out alive. Everything happened so fast after that. Just as Sarah's fingers were about to touch the creature, I remembered something from my grandfather's journal, a prayer he'd written down. With shaking hands, I pulled out the journal and started reading the words out loud. The Jersey Devil let out an angry screech that shook dust from the ceiling. It spread its wings, making itself look bigger, but I kept reading. Sarah stopped walking, like she was frozen in place. "Dad," she said in a strange voice that didn't sound like hers. "It's showing me things about Mom, about Grandpa, about why our family is connected to it." The creature's eyes glowed bright, and suddenly blue fire shot from its mouth, hitting the wall behind us. The heat was intense, but the iron cross in my hand grew cold, almost freezing. "Sarah, honey, fight it," I shouted. "Remember what Mom used to say? Our family's strength is in our love for each other." That's when something amazing happened. Sarah blinked, like she was waking up from a dream. She took a step back toward me, and I saw tears in her eyes. "It's so sad, Dad," she whispered. "It's been alone for so long. The curse, it doesn't want to hurt people. It just wants to end its pain." The devil roared again, but this time it sounded different. Almost like it was crying. The symbols on the floor started glowing brighter and brighter. I remembered the last part of my grandfather's notes. The curse can't be broken by force, only through understanding and forgiveness. Sarah turned to face the creature. "We forgive you," she said clearly. "We forgive Mother Leeds for cursing you. You don't have to be alone anymore." The Jersey Devil froze. Its red eyes dimmed, and for a moment it looked almost peaceful. Then it threw its head back and let out a sound like no other, not a scream this time, but more like a sigh of relief. Bright light filled the basement, so bright we had to close our eyes. When we opened them again, the devil was gone. In its place, on the dirt floor, was a single black feather and a small, old-fashioned baby rattle, the kind used in colonial times. Sarah swayed on her feet, and I caught her before she fell. Her fever was gone. The headaches disappeared. Outside, the strange weather cleared up, and dawn was breaking through the basement windows. "Is it over?" Sarah asked, holding on to me. "I think so, sweetheart, but differently than anyone expected. You didn't fight it. You helped it find peace." As we climbed back up the basement stairs, exhausted but alive, I realized something important. Sometimes the scariest things in life aren't what they seem. Sometimes they're just lost souls needing forgiveness and understanding. We drove home in silence as the sun rose over the pine barrens. The woods seemed different now. lighter somehow, like a heavy shadow had been lifted. The missing trappers were found later that day, confused but unharmed, with no memory of where they'd been. Life changed a lot after that night at the Leeds mansion. The livestock killings stopped, and the strange fires disappeared, but the biggest change was in our family. Sarah and I sat on our porch that evening, watching the sunset over the pine trees. She held the black feather we'd found, turning it over in her hands. "You know, Dad," she said softly, "I can still feel things sometimes, not scary things like before, but different. Like I can tell when a storm is coming, or when an animal in the forest is hurt." I nodded, sipping my coffee. "Your grandmother had that gift too. I guess some things run in families." We turned the Leeds mansion into a protected area. Father Michael helped us bless the ground, and I put up signs marking it as a wildlife sanctuary. The locals stopped telling scary stories about the Jersey Devil. Instead, they started talking about the strange lights that sometimes appear over the Pine Barrens on quiet nights. Beautiful, peaceful lights that look like dancing stars. But we kept some things secret, like how Sarah's drawings now show glimpses of things before they happen, or how sometimes, on full moon nights, we hear a distant sound that's not quite a horse's whinny and not quite a bird's cry. But it's not scary anymore. It's more like a reminder. I still carry my grandfather's silver cross, and his journal sits on our bookshelf. Sometimes, when I'm doing my ranger rounds, I'll find strange hoof prints in the soft ground. But they don't make me afraid. They just remind me that not all monsters are really monsters, and sometimes the scariest stories can have the most surprising endings. Sarah's doing better in school now. The headaches never came back, but she started a club for kids who love local history. They meet every week to share stories about the Pine Barrens. Sometimes, I catch her telling them a different version of the Jersey Devil story, one about forgiveness and understanding, not fear. Last week, she found something interesting in her grandmother's old box, a letter that explains more about our family's connection to the Leeds mansion. But that's another story, one that might need telling another time. For now, we keep watch over these woods together. A father and daughter who learned that the line between scary and sacred isn't always clear. And sometimes, on quiet evenings like this, when the wind whispers through the pine trees, we remember that night and know that some family secrets are worth keeping. "Dad," Sarah says, pointing to the sky where a shooting star streaks across the darkness, "do you think it's really gone forever?" I smile and put my arm around her shoulders. "No, honey, I think it's finally at peace, just like us. And that's the real end of our story, not with a battle or a curse, but with understanding and a kind of peace we never expected to find." My name is Paul Whitaker, and this happened to me back in 1987 when I was working as a forest ranger in Manistee National Forest, Michigan. I was 45 then, and I thought I had seen everything in my 20 years of working in these woods. But what I experienced that October changed everything I believed about our world. It was unusually warm for late October. I remember that day clearly. Michael's the sun was setting, and this weird mist was rising from the swamps, making everything look like something out of a horror movie. I was out investigating what we thought were regular timber wolf attacks. You see, that's normal in our area. What wasn't normal was what I found. I still get chills thinking about it. There were wolf carcasses scattered around, but not like anything I'd seen before. These weren't killed by other wolves or bears. Something much bigger had torn them apart. And the strangest thing, some of the trees had claw marks about 8 feet high, way too high for any normal animal we have in Michigan. That evening, things got even weirder. My radio started picking up these howls that made my skin crawl. I've heard wolf howls thousands of times, but these sounded almost human, like someone trying to copy a wolf, but not quite getting it right. And then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Those ancient Native American burial mounds were supposed to protect. They looked like something had been digging around them. I should have left right then. but I couldn't. You see, this forest holds a personal mystery for me. My brother went missing here in 1975, and we never found him. I guess that's partly why I became a ranger, hoping that someday, somehow, I'd find answers. What I didn't know then was that this was just the beginning. Those strange findings that evening would lead me into the darkest experience of my life, and finally reveal the truth about what really lives in these woods. The next morning I couldn't shake off that uneasy feeling. Something wasn't right in my forest. You know how sometimes you can just feel when things are off? Well, this was one of those times. I decided to check out the area again, but this time in daylight. As I drove my ranger truck down the muddy forest road, I kept thinking about what my grandfather used to tell me when I was little. He'd sit me down by the fireplace and share stories about strange creatures that lived in these woods. Back then, I thought they were just stories to keep kids from wandering too far into the forest. Now, I wasn't so sure anymore. That's when I saw something that made me slam on my brakes. Right there, in the middle of the path, was a deer midia standing straight up, like it had been placed there. Not lying down like you'd normally find a dead deer, but standing. Its eyes were wide open, frozen in fear. I've been a wildlife biologist before becoming a ranger, and I'd never seen anything like this. I got out of my truck to take a closer look. The morning was quiet, too quiet. You know how forests usually have birds chirping and squirrels running around? There was nothing, just dead silence. As I got closer to the deer, I noticed something else that made my heart skip a beat. The tracks around it. They looked like wolf prints, but different. Some were normal wolf prints, but others, they were huge, and they showed whatever made them was walking on two legs. Just then, my radio crackled to life. "Paul, you there?" It was Linda from the ranger station. "We've got another missing hiker report. 5th one this month." I keyed my radio. "Where this time?" "Near the old burial grounds. Same area as the others." I looked at my map. All these disappearances were forming a pattern, and I was standing right in the middle of it. That's when I heard it mid-yes, a branch snapping in the woods behind me. I turned around slowly, and through the morning mist, I saw something that would haunt me forever. Through the mist, about 50 yards away, I saw two glowing amber eyes staring right at me. They were way too high off the ground to be a normal wolf, maybe 7 or 8 feet up. My whole body froze. Those eyes, they weren't just looking at me, they were studying me like a person would. I've dealt with bears, wolves, and all kinds of wild animals in my years as a ranger, but this was different. My hand slowly moved to my gun, but something in my mind screamed, "Don't move." It was like those eyes had some kind of power over me. Then it happened. The creature stepped forward just enough for me to see its shape. It looked like a wolf, but it was standing on two legs, like a person. Its shoulders were massive, and its arms, if you could call them that, mid-yes, hung down with hands that had long, sharp claws. But what really got me was when it tilted its head and smiled. Yes, smiled, like it knew exactly who I was. Suddenly, my radio burst into static, making me jump. When I looked back up, the creature was gone, but I could hear it moving through the forest, and then something that still gives me nightmares, it laughed. Not like a human laugh, but not like any animal sound either. It was somewhere in between. I jumped back in my truck and radioed the station. "Linda, get me everything you can about the missing hikers, and I need access to the old files, especially anything from 1975. 1975. That's when your brother," Linda's voice trailed off. "Yeah, I think I'm finally starting to understand what happened to him." Back at the ranger station, I spread out all the maps and reports on my desk. As I was going through them, I found something in an old drawer, my brother's camera. It had been sitting there all these years. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The camera was old and dusty, but somehow the film was still inside. I took it to Bob's photo shop in town. He's been developing pictures since forever. When I went to pick them up the next day, Bob looked pale. "Paul," he said, his hands trembling as he handed me the envelope. "I've been developing photos for 30 years, but these aren't normal. I opened the envelope right there in his shop. The first few pictures were just regular forest shots. Trees, some bird, nothing special. Then I got to the last 3 photos, and my mouth went dry. The first one showed a dark shape behind some trees, those same amber eyes glowing in the darkness. The second picture was blurry, like my brother had been running when he took it. But the third photo, it was clear as day. There was our creature, half hidden behind a large oak tree, watching the camera. But what scared me most was the background. I recognized that tree. It was right next to the old burial mounds. Just then my radio crackled. "Paul, you need to come back right away." Linda's voice was shaking. "There's someone here you need to meet. He's a native elder, says he knows about what's happening in the forest." When I got back to the station, an old man was sitting in my office. His name was Joseph Running Bear, and he'd been living near these woods his whole life. The moment I walked in, he pointed at the photos in my hand. So he said quietly, "You've seen it too. The one my people call the Shadow Walker. It's been here longer than any of us." I sat down, my heart pounding. "Tell me everything you know." Joseph leaned forward, his eyes serious. "First you need to understand, this thing you're dealing with. It's not just some animal, and it's been watching your family for a very long time." Joseph took a deep breath and started telling me a story that changed everything I thought I knew about our forest. "Your grandfather," he said, "he knew about this creature. That's why he told you those stories when you were young. He wasn't just trying to scare you, he was trying to warn you." I felt a chill run down my spine. "But why my family?" "Because your great-grandfather was the first ranger who tried to stop it. Back in 1902, he found its den near the burial mounds. The creature, it doesn't forget, and it doesn't forgive." Joseph pulled out an old leather pouch. Inside was a piece of copper shaped like a spearhead. "This is the only thing that can hurt it. Our people learned this hundreds of years ago. Iron won't work. Silver won't work. Only copper." "But what exactly is it?" I asked. "We call it the Shadow Walker because it can move between our world and the spirit world. It controls the wolves, makes them do things they wouldn't normally do. And those missing hikers, it's building its pack. Every few decades, it needs to grow stronger." Just then we heard wolves howling outside the station. But these weren't normal howls, these strange, almost human sounds I'd heard before. Joseph's face went white. "It knows we're talking about it," he whispered, "and the blood moon is coming in 3 days. That's when it's strongest. That's when it took your brother." I looked at the copper spearhead, then at my brother's photos. "How do I find its den?" Joseph grabbed my arm. "The real question is, are you ready for what you'll find there? Because once you start this hunt, Paul, you can't turn back. The Shadow Walker won't let you." The wolves kept howling closer now. And somewhere in those howls, I swear I heard my brother's voice. I spent the next day getting ready. Joseph helped me make a copper spear, just like the ones his ancestors used. I also called in 3 of my most trusted ranger friends, Mike, Sarah, and Tom. They'd known about my brother, and after seeing the photos, they believed me. That night, something strange happened. All the wolves in the forest started howling at exactly the same time. Then, one by one, they went silent. Even the crickets stopped chirping. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath. The next morning, we found fresh tracks leading to the burial mounds. But these were different Mayas. They showed the creature was walking on 2 legs, then 4, then 2 again. And it was leading us somewhere. "It's playing with us," Sarah whispered, her hand tight on her rifle. "No," I said, remembering Joseph's words. "It's inviting us." We followed the tracks to a part of the forest I'd never seen before. The trees here were different Mayas, older, twisted in strange ways. That's when we found the entrance to its den. It wasn't just a cave, Mayas, it was like a whole network of tunnels going deep underground. The smell hit us first. Like wet dog mixed with something much worse. Our flashlights showed claw marks all along the tunnel walls, and then we saw the Maya's bones. Lots of bones. Some were from animals, but some were human. "Paul," Mike's voice shook as he pointed his light at the wall. "Look, there scratched into the rock was a message, 'Welcome home, Ranger.'" Suddenly we heard that laugh again. That horrible half-human, half-wolf laugh. It was coming from deeper in the tunnels, and it wasn't alone. Multiple pairs of amber eyes started appearing in the darkness ahead of us. The tunnel suddenly filled with growls, but not just wolf growls. Some sounded almost human. Our flashlights caught glimpses of wolves moving in the shadows, but they were acting strange, like puppets being controlled by someone else. "Stay together," I shouted, gripping the copper spear tight. That's when I saw it, Maya's, the Shadow Walker, standing at its full height in the tunnel ahead. It was even bigger than before, nearly 9 feet tall now. Those amber eyes glowed brighter than our flashlights, and its mouth had rows of teeth, like nothing I'd ever seen. "Paul Whitaker," it spoke, its voice a horrible mix of growl and human speech. "Your brother was brave too." That's when it hit me. All these years, it had been waiting for me. My brother's disappearance, the missing hikers, everything was meant to bring me here. The creature lunged forward, faster than anything that big should move. Sarah fired her rifle, but the bullets seemed to pass right through it like smoke. Mike and Tom got separated from us as more wolves appeared, herding us deeper into the tunnels. "The copper," I heard Sarah scream. "Use the copper." I thrust the spear forward just as the Shadow Walker reached for me. The copper blade cut through its arm, and for the first time the creature screamed in pain. Real pain. Black blood dripped from the wound, sizzling when it hit the ground. But then something worse happened. The Shadow Walker smiled again, and in the darkness behind it I saw something that made my heart stop. There were people standing there, the missing hikers, but they weren't people anymore. Their eyes glowed amber just like the creatures. Everything happened so fast after that. The changed hikers, they moved like wolves now, but still looked mostly human. They came at us from all sides. Sarah got scratched badly on her arm, and Tom was nowhere to be seen. "Run," Mike shouted, trying to hold them back. But I couldn't run, because right then I saw something in a corner of the cave that made my whole world stop. A familiar blue jacket, torn and dirty, but I knew it was my brother. The Shadow Walker saw me looking at it. "Yes," it growled. "He's still here. They're all still here." That's when I got really angry. Not scared anymore, just angry. All these years of wondering, all those nights hoping my brother might still be alive somewhere. This thing had kept him here, changed him into something else. I gripped the copper spear with both hands. "This ends tonight." The creature threw back its head and made that terrible laughing sound again. Then its body started to change. Its bones cracked and shifted, making it even bigger. Spikes of bone pushed through its skin like armor, and its claws grew longer. "Your grandfather couldn't stop me," it snarled. "Your brother couldn't stop me. What makes you think you can?" But it had made a mistake. While it was talking, I noticed something miss it. There was a pattern in the cave floor, an old tribal circle, just like Joseph had described. If I could just get the creature to step into it. "Because," I said, backing up slowly, "they didn't know what I know now." The Shadow Walker lunged at me, exactly like I hoped it would. As the Shadow Walker lunged at me, I dove to the side, making it land right in the middle of that tribal circle. The moment it touched the ancient markings, something amazing happened. The circle started to glow with a faint blue light, just like Joseph said it would. The creature howled in rage, but it couldn't move out of the circle. It was trapped, at least for a few moments. The transformed hikers and wolves suddenly stopped too, like they were frozen in place. "Now," I yelled to Sarah and Mike. They knew what to do. We had 3 copper spears between us, and we all threw them at the same time, just like Joseph taught us. The Shadow Walker tried to dodge, but the circle held it. 2 spears hit it, minus one in the chest, one in the shoulder. The creature's scream shook the whole cave, making rocks fall from the ceiling. Its black blood was everywhere now, burning holes in the ground. But something went wrong. The creature's thrashing broke the circle. Before any of us could move, it grabbed me with its massive claws and pulled me close to its face. Those amber eyes were right in front of mine, and I could feel it trying to get into my head just like it did with the others. "Join your brother," it growled. That's when I heard another voice, Midas weak, but familiar. "Paul." In the corner where I'd seen the jacket, something moved. It was Tom. He'd found my brother's old journal in the jacket pocket, and he was reading something out loud, words in an ancient language that made the Shadow Walker screech in pain. The creature's grip loosened just enough. I pulled out my last weapon, Midas, a small copper knife Joseph had given me, Midas, and drove it straight into those glowing eyes. The cave started shaking like crazy. The Shadow Walker let out one final terrible scream, Midas not like a wolf or a human, but like something from another world. Its body started breaking apart, turning into black smoke. The wolves it controlled suddenly came to their senses and ran away howling. But the worst part wasn't over. The cave was collapsing. "Everyone out, now!" I shouted. Mike helped the injured Sarah, while Tom grabbed my brother's journal and jacket. We ran through the tunnels as rocks fell all around us. Just before we reached the exit, I looked back one last time. Through the falling rocks and dust, I saw the transformed hikers. They were changing back to normal, but they looked confused and scared. "Come on," I yelled to them. "Follow us." We barely made it out. The whole tunnel system collapsed behind us, burying the Shadow Walker's den forever. As we stood there, catching our breath in the early morning light, I counted the survivors. We'd managed to save 3 of the 5 missing hikers. They didn't remember much, just bad dreams of glowing eyes and darkness. But my brother, we found his remains in that cave. At least now I knew what happened to him. At least now he could rest in peace. Joseph was waiting for us at the ranger station. When I told him what happened, he just nodded slowly. "It's not dead," he said quietly. "Things like that don't die, but you've sent it back to sleep. Maybe for another 50 years, maybe longer." That was 2 months ago. The forest is quiet now. The wolves act normal again, and no more hikers have gone missing. But sometimes, on really dark nights, I still hear that strange howl in the distance. And when I do, I hold tight to my copper knife and remember what my grandfather used to say. The forest keeps its secrets, but it also keeps its promises. I don't know if the Shadow Walker will ever come back, but if it does, we'll be ready. Because now we know how to fight it. Now we know what lives in these woods.